Hey folks, this is Andrew with Everwood Creations, and today I'm doing a quick shop project. What I'm doing is making a new crosscut sled. A crosscut sled is one of those tools that is crucial in a shop. We can use it on the table saw to make accurate crosscuts, and they come out perfectly square. And the other nice thing is it's fast and safe. I've made quite a few different crosscut sleds along the way, and most of them have just kind of been tossed together trying to decide what I really wanted. The crosscut sled that I'm going to show you how to build today is a design that I came up with after watching lots and lots of different YouTube woodworkers and their crosscut sleds. To give credit where credit is due, I would say that my design is probably a combination of elements from the Wood Whisperer, Mark Spagnolo, and King's Fine Woodworking, and probably Stumpy Nub's channel as well, and also William Ing. So there are a lot of videos out there on how to do crosscut sleds. This is just my interpretation of it, and so come on, let me show you how it's done.
I began by measuring the top of my table saw and deciding on a good size of crosscut sled for my saw. Basically, you can make a sled any size that you wish, but it should pretty much fit the saw top and give you some room to place the stock to be cut. I chose to make mine 24 inches wide by 20 inches deep. I cut 2 pieces of 1/2-inch Baltic birch plywood for my sled, and on the top piece I drew a line of about where the blade will come through. I then drew one line on each side of the blade that will be the inside of the dado grooves for the T-track, which will let me use the hold downs. I also marked where the runners will be on the underside so that I don't accidentally put any screws or brad nails there. I made sure to run the grain on the plywood opposite directions to help keep the sled flat. Now I make sure my glue surfaces are fairly clean and that there is no flex in the 2 pieces when they are together. Next, I apply some glue to the bottom piece of plywood and spread it out with a glue spreader card. Putting the 2 pieces together, I check for good alignment, then tack them together with some brad nails, making sure to avoid any place that may cause an issue. Now, using a countersink bit set to the length of the 3/4 inch screws I'm using, I drill holes in the locations I marked earlier. Next, I secure the 2 pieces together with screws that sit just below the surface, so they don't interfere with the flat surface of the sled. While I'm gluing parts, I go ahead and glue up a 3-inch tall front fence for the sled from 2 pieces of 1/2-inch plywood, and a back fence from 2 pieces of 3/4 inch plywood. Now that the body of the sled is built, the next step is to cut the runners that will fit in the miter slots on the table saw. I have decided to use a plastic cutting board here instead of the traditional hardwood. I saw someone else do this for their crosscut sled and thought it was genius, since you never have to worry about the runners expanding or contracting with the seasons. I picked up this cutting board cheap at a big box store. The first cut I make is to remove the juice groove on the edge of the cutting board. Next, I reset my fence to 3/4 of an inch, the width of my miter slots, then cut a runner and test the fit. I found it to be a little too tight, so I made a tiny adjustment to the fence and then cut again. After a couple of times, I got a perfect fit and then cut the other runner. With the runners cut, I can now attach them to the bottom of the sled. By stacking washers in the bottom of the miter slots, I can bring the surface of the runners to just above the surface of my saw. I will use the fence to keep everything aligned when I glue the runners onto the sled, so I check that everything looks good before I apply the glue, and pencil a little alignment mark on the fence to help me get the fit that I want. Now I apply a line of CA glue to each of the runners, then spray some activator on the bottom of the sled. Then I drop the sled in place and apply a few seconds of firm pressure. I can then carefully pick up the sled, and the runners are temporarily attached. With the runners held in place with the CA glue, I can now drill some countersunk holes to secure them permanently with screws. The CA glue didn't hold quite as well as I thought it would, and the cutting board plastic turned out to be a little more fragile than I expected. but in the end, I did get 2 usable runners attached to the sled. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going to install T-track in the surface of my crosscut sled. I have installed a dado blade stacked out to 3/4 of an inch in the saw, and I'm lining up the cuts with the marks I made earlier. I chose to set the grooves so that the hold downs I am using will be able to hold material very close to the blade but never be able to touch it. I run the sled over the dado blade using a push pad to apply firm pressure and ensure a good flat bottom groove. Then I move my fence and repeat the process for the other groove. I install the T-tracks in the groove and cut a dado in the back fence to accept T-track for a stop block. Now it's time to install the front fence. I have clamped the fence in place and secured the sled to my bench. Now I can drill some countersunk holes through the bottom of the sled and secure the front fence with screws, being sure to avoid the path of the blade. With the front fence installed, I can now make the initial kerfing cut on the sled. The key here is to make sure that you saw through the sled and front fence, but not all the way to the back. You are looking to establish a saw kerf line to use when attaching your back fence so that you can get it close to square. Now, I make sure to install the hold downs on the sled, as I won't be able to get them in the T-track after I install the back fence. You can see here that I have also installed the T-track in the face of the back fence as well. Now I clamp the back fence to the sled just like I did the front fence, and making it as square as possible to the saw kerf I just cut. Getting close here is good enough, as I will be making it perfectly square in a few minutes. Now I flip the sled over and secure the fence with just 2 countersunk screws, one on each end. The next step in this process is to first make a through cut of the sled with the blade at maximum height. You will notice that the carbide blade simply cuts right through the aluminum T-track in the face of the back fence, and this is a perfectly safe operation. Now I'm going to use the 5-cut method to square my sled. The person who I believe popularized or maybe even invented this method is William Ing. I won't go into all of the math and details here, but I will link to his video down below. Basically, the 5-cut method will leave you with an offcut that is wider on one end than the other. By measuring the difference and the length of the piece, you can determine which way and how much to adjust your back fence so it is perfect. In my case, the end of the fence needed to come in by a few thousandths of an inch. So I clamped a block offset from the fence with a feeler gauge to the sled body, then removed the screw, adjusted the fence, then put in a new screw. You will not be able to use the same screw hole as before, as it will simply go back to its old position. Once you have made the adjustment, repeat the 5 cuts and it should be near perfect.
Okay, after making that last fence adjustment, this is that final piece that came off. Upon measuring it and doing the calculations, this crosscut sled is now square to within 0.02 of an inch across the length of the entire fence. So that's pretty good. So after squaring the fence, what I decided to do was go ahead and put a safety block here on the back. Now you'll see this done on a lot of crosscut sleds, and the design really varies. Sometimes people integrate them into the fence. Sometimes they round them over and make them nice and comfortable. Personally, my feeling is, I know it sounds weird, I don't like mine to be comfortable. The whole point of this is to keep your thumbs out of the crosscuts, or out of the blade as it comes through the back of the crosscut sled right here. So, if you're going to build a crosscut sled, you need to basically make yours whatever size fits. Now, I don't want to get splinters from it, but I definitely want to hit a block that reminds me this is keeping my thumbs out of the blade. And as you can see, if I've got my hands on top of the fence, I cannot get my thumbs will not get in the blade. The other features that we have here on the crosscut sled are are adjustable hold downs for when you've got work that's just a little close to the blade for your liking, or you need to hold something down hold something that has a strange angle or anything like that. When not in use, obviously, they can just come up here to the front of the sled, lock down, out of the way. The other feature that I went ahead and put on this sled, you'll notice I put a T-track all the way across here. And with that, I created a stop that will slide in and out. When not in use, I can just simply flip the stop upside down, put it in here, lock it down, flip it sideways, lock it down. The majority of the time I'm working with 3/4 inch thick stock, which will slide under this with no problem. So, as I was saying at the beginning of the video, folks, there are a lot of different videos out there on YouTube about how to build a crosscut sled. This one is just my interpretation. I encourage you, before you build your own crosscut sled, watch a lot of videos. I want to thank you very much for watching my video. If you've liked what you've seen here today, please go ahead and click like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, please leave them in the comments section and we'll be glad to answer them. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, have fun and stay safe in the shop.